ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्तस्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषशून्यवादी पाश्चात्देशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna, we welcome everyone for today morning reading. We are reading from the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, verse number 3 onwards. Narupamaseha tatopalabhayate nanto nachade nacha sampratishtha ashvathamenam suvirudhamulam asangashastrena dradena chitva तथा पदं तत्परिभागितव्यं यस्मिन् गता न निवर्तन्ति भूयः तमेव चाद्यं पुरुषं प्रपद्ये यथा प्रवृत्ति पृष्ठा पुराणी। Translation purport by Srila Prabhupada. The real form of this tree cannot be perceived in this world. Which tree is being discussed? The banyan tree. What is a banyan tree? The original banyan tree is in the spiritual world, but the reflection of that banyan tree is known as the material world. And that is what is being discussed here in this chapter. The real form of this tree cannot be perceived in this world. No one can understand where it ends and where it begins, or where its foundation is. But with determination, one must cut down the strongly rooted tree with the weapon of detachment. Thereafter, one must seek that place from which, having gone, one never returns, and there surrender to that Supreme Personality Godhead from whom everything began and from whom everything has extended since time immemorial. Purport. It is now clearly stated that the real form of this banyan tree cannot be understood in the material world. Since the root is upwards, the extension of the real tree is at the other end. When entangled with the metal expansions of the tree, one cannot see how far the tree extends, nor can one see the beginning of this tree. Yet one has to find out the cause. I am the son of my father is the son of such and such person, etc. By searching in this way, one comes to Brahma, who is generated by the Garbhodaksha Vishnu. Finally, in this way, when one reaches the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that is the end of research work. One has to search out that origin of this tree, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, through the association of persons who are in knowledge of that Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then, by understanding, one becomes gradually detached from this false reflection of reality. And by knowledge, one can cut off the connection and actually become situated in the real tree. Hare Krishna. Oh, there's more to the purport. The word asanga is very important. Detachment. In this connection, because attachment for sense enjoyment and lording it over the material nature is very strong, therefore one must learn detachment by discussion of spiritual science based on authoritative scriptures. And one must hear from persons who are actually in knowledge. As a result of such discussion and association of devotees, one comes to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then the first thing one must do is surrender to Him. The description of that place whence, having gone, one never returns to this false reflected tree is given here. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is the original root from whom everything has emanated. To gain favor of that Personality of Godhead, one has only to surrender, and this is a result of performing devotional service by hearing, chanting, etc. He is the cause of the extension of the material world. This has already been explained by the Lord Himself. Aham sarvasya prabhavaha 10.8. I am the origin of everything. Therefore, to get out of the entanglement of the strong banyan tree of material life, one must surrender to Krishna. And as soon as one surrenders into Krishna, one becomes detached. automatically from this material extension. And what are the qualities required for that? The next verse, the very famous verse, describes that. Nirmana moha jita sanga dosha adhyatma nitya vinivarta kama dvandve vimukta sukha dukha smagne gacchantya mudha padamavyayanta. So those who are free from false prestige, nirman, moha, chitta sanga dosha, false association, who understand the eternal, who are done with the material lust, adhyatma nitya, who understand the eternal, adhyatma nitya, who are free from vinivatta kama, who are done with the lust, who are freed, dvande vimukta, sukha dukkha smagne, dvande vimukta, freed from the dualities of happiness and distress, and dvande vimukta, free from and who unbewildered, know how to surrender to the Supreme Personality into the eternal kingdom. Gacchantya mudha, who is not bewildered, padam avayam tat, such a person attains to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So who is free from false prestige, illusion, false association, adhyatma nitya, always situated in eternity, vinivritta kama, free from lust, dvande vimukta, free from dualities of sukha and dukkha, gachanti muda, and is who was not bewildered. Such a person attains to that Supreme Personality of Godhead. Krishna Chandra Prabhu would like to read the purports.
Yeah, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare.
The selection process is described here very nicely. The first qualification is that one should not be deluded by pride. Because the conditioned soul is puffed up, thinking himself the lord of material nature, it is difficult for him to surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One should know by the cultivation of real knowledge that he is not lord of material nature. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the Lord. When one is free from delusion caused by pride, he can begin the process of surrender. For one who is always expecting some honor in this material world, it is not possible to surrender to the Supreme Person. Pride is due to illusion. For although one comes here, stays for a brief time, and then goes away, he has the foolish notion that he is the Lord of the world. It thus makes all things complicated, and he is always in trouble. The whole world moves under this impression. People are considering the land, this earth, to belong to human society, and they have divided the land under the false impression that they are the proprietors. One has to get out of this false notion that human society is the proprietor of this world. When one is freed from such false notion, he becomes free from all false associations caused by familiar, social, and national affection. The faulty association bind one to this material world. After this stage, one has to develop spiritual knowledge. One has to cultivate knowledge for what is actually his own and what is actually not his own. And when one has an understanding of things as they are, he becomes free from all dual conceptions such as happiness and distress, pleasure and pain. He becomes full in knowledge. Then it is possible for him to surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Now starts a very interesting discussion. So far in the first 5 verses, the material world is briefly being described, and our goal, Padam Avayam Tat, is being described, that we have to go back home, back to Godhead. The process of it is detachment from this material world, and then Prabhupada tells us what detachment from this material world means, which means attachment to devotees, attachment to Krishna. Like that has been discussed. Now, Lord Shri Krishna briefly will introduce or speak about the spiritual world, and then Lord Shri Krishna will say why you should come back to me, because I'm your father. Everything is my part and parcel. That is a discussion which goes on. However, a foolish person does not understand, who is the original father. Like that is a discussion comes now. Very interesting series. Text number 6. Na tadavasate suryo na shashukana pavaka yadgatva nivartante tathama paramamama. So Krishna says that supreme abode of mind is not illumined by the sun or moon, nor by fire or electricity. Those who reach it never return to this material world. Okay, so there are 3, 4 paragraphs. One or two devotees can read it. Mother Radhika, please read the first 2 paragraphs.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam. The spiritual world, the abode of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, which is known as Krishna Loka, Goloka Vrindavana, is described here. In the spiritual sky, there is no need of sunshine, moonshine, fire, or electricity because all the planets are self luminous. We have only one planet in this universe, the sun, which is self luminous. But all the planets in the spiritual sky are self luminous. The shining effulgence of all those planets, called Vaikunthas, constitute the shining sky known as Brahma Jyoti. Actually, the effulgence is emanating from the planet of Krishna, Goloka Vrindavana. Part of that shining effulgence is covered by the Mahatattva, the material world. Other than this, the major portion of that shining sky is full of spiritual planets, which are called Vaikunthas, chief of which is Goloka Vrindavana. As long as a living entity in this dark material world, he is in conditional life. But as soon as he reaches the spiritual sky, by cutting through the false perverted tree of this material world, he becomes liberated. Then there is no chance of his coming back here. In his conditional life, the living entity considers himself to be the lord of this material world. But in his liberated state, he enters into the spiritual kingdom and becomes an associate of the Supreme Lord. There he enjoys eternal bliss, eternal life, and full knowledge.
Hare Krishna. Mother Priyanka, can you read the other 2 paragraphs? Go ahead.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam.
Yes.
Purport by Srila Prabhupada ki jai. One should be captivated by this information. He should desire to transfer himself to that eternal world and extricate himself from this false reflection of reality. For one who is too much attached to this material world, it is very difficult to cut that attachment. But if he takes to Krishna consciousness, there is a chance of gradually becoming detached. One has to associate himself with devotees, those who are in Krishna consciousness. One should search out a society dedicated to Krishna consciousness and learn how to discharge devotional service. In this way, he can cut off his attachment to the material world. One cannot become detached from the attraction of the material world simply by dressing himself in saffron cloth. He must become attached to the devotional service of the Lord. Therefore, one should take it very seriously that devotional service, as described in the 12th chapter, is only way to get out of this false representation of the real tree. In chapter 14, the contamination of all kinds of processes by material nature is described. Only devotional service is described as pure devotion, pure transcendental, as purely transcendental. The word Paramam, Mama are very important here. Actually, every nook and corner in the property of the Supreme Lord, but the spiritual world is Paramam, full of 6 opulences. The Katha Upanishad 2.2:15 also confirms that in the spiritual world, there is no need of sunshine, moonshine, or stars. Na tatra surya bhati, na chandra tarakam. For the whole spiritual sky is illuminated by the eternal potency of the Supreme Lord. That supreme abode can be achieved only by surrender and by no other means. Hare Krishna.
Hare
Prabhuji.
Krishna. So, Natad Bhasita, Surya. So that place is full of knowledge, full of bliss. That place is not requires any artificial illumination, whereas the material world is a place of darkness. Therefore, it is said, Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya, Mrityumva Amritamgamaya. Like that is described. All right. Text number 7. Mamaivaamshu jivaloke jivabhuta sanatana mana shashkani indriyani pratisthani karshati. Krishna tells, the living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the 6 senses, which include the mind. Wait for it again. Okay, Madanjana, please read the first paragraph.
Krishna. In this verse, the identity of the living beings is clearly given. The living entity is the fragmental part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. eternally. It is not that he assumes individuality in his conditional life and in his liberated state becomes one with the Supreme Lord. He is eternally fragmented. It is clearly said, Sanatana, according to the Vedic version, the Supreme Lord manifests and expands himself in innumerable expansions, of which the primary expansions are called Vishnu Tattva and the secondary expansions are called the living entities. In other words, the Vishnu Tattva is the personal expansion and the living entities are the separated expansions. By his personal expansion, he is manifested in various forms like Lord Rama, Narsimhadeva, Vishnu Murti, and all the predominated deities in the Vaikuntha planet. The separated expansions, the living entities are eternally servitors. The personal expansions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the individual identities of the Godhead are always present. Similarly, the separated expansions of the living entities have their identities. As fragmental parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, the living entities also have fragmental portions of his qualities, of which independence is one. Every living entity as an individual soul has its personal individuality and a minute form of independence. By misuse of that independence, one becomes a conscious soul, and by proper use of independence, he is always liberated. In each case, he is qualitatively eternal, as the Supreme Lord is. In his liberated state, he is freed from this material condition, and he is under the engagement of transcendental service unto the Lord. In his conditional life, he is dominated by the material modes of nature, and he forgets the transcendental loving service of the Lord. As a result, he has no struggle. He has to struggle very hard to maintain his existence in the material world. The living entities, not only human beings and the cats and dogs,
Yeah,
but
Hare
even the
Krishna.
greater
We
Hare
can just,
Krishna.
yeah. Mana Shashtani Indriyani Prakriti Sthani Karshati. This is what is Prabhupada was explaining at the end of the first paragraph. The whole paragraph actually, where Prabhupada said, although we are part and parcel of the Lord, we are supposed to be full of bliss, full of knowledge, full of eternity. But unfortunately, we are caught up in this. Manaha Shashtani Indriyani. The six senses, the six is the mind. Prakriti Sthani Karshati. We are caught up in this material world and we are undergoing karshan. Karshan means struggle. This also means friction actually. We're going through extreme struggle for survival here. And the center of that whole point is the mind, like this. Prabhupada talked about it in the purport. So that's the point. And now comes the next part of the paragraph. So the first part of the paragraph, Prabhupada explained how, he has different expansions, etc., etc. Okay, but the Sangeeta, you can read this next paragraph here. The living entities.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandvat Pranam. The living entities, not only human beings and the cats and dogs, but even the greater controllers of the material world. Brahma, Lord, Shiva, and even Vishnu are all parts of parcels of the Supreme Lord. They are all eternal, not temporary manifestations. The word
Karshati.
Karshati, struggling or grappling hard, is very significant. The conditioned soul is bound up as though shackled by icon chains. He is bound up by the false ego, and the mind is the chief agent which is driving him in this material existence. When the mind is in the mode of goodness, his activities are good. When the mind is in the mode of passion, his activities are troublesome. And when the mind is in the mode of ignorance, he travels in the lower species of life. It is clear, however, in this verse that the conditioned soul is covered by the material body, with the mind, with the senses, and when he is liberated, this material covering perishes, but his spiritual body manifests itself in its individual capacity. The following information is there in the
Madhya
Madhya
Andina Ayana Shruti. Sava Isha Brahmanishta Idam Shariram Mrityam Ati Srichya. Brahmavi Sampadya Brahmana Pashyati Brahmana Shrunoti Brahmane Vedam Sarvam Anubhavati. Continue.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, thank you. It is stated here that when a living entity gives up this material embodiment and enters into the spiritual world, He revives his spiritual body, and in his spiritual body, he can see the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face. He can hear and speak to him face to face, and he can understand the Supreme Personality as he is. From Smriti, also it is understood Vasanti Yatra Parusha Sarve Vaikunt Mrutya. In the spiritual planet, everyone lives in the bodies featured like the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As far as bodily construction is concerned, there is no difference between the part and parcel living entities and the expansions of Vishnu Murti in the other words. At liberation, and the living entity gets a spiritual body by the grace of Supreme Personality of Godhead. The
Continue.
words Mami, Vasma, fragmental parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord are also very significant. The fragmental portion of the Supreme Lord is not like some material broken part. We have already understood in the second chapter that the spirit cannot be cut into pieces. This fragment is not materially conceived. It is not like matter, which can be cut into pieces and joined together again. That conception is not applicable here because the Sanskrit word Sanatana, eternal, is used. The fragmental portion is eternal. It is also stated in the beginning of the second chapter that in each and every individual body, the fragmental portion of the Supreme Lord is present. Dehinosmin yatha dehe, the fragmental portion which liberated from the bodily entanglement revives its original spiritual body in the spiritual sky, in a spiritual planet, and enjoys association with the Supreme Lord. It is, however, understood here that the living entity, being the fragmental part of parcel of the Supreme Lord, is qualitatively one with the Lord, just as the parts and parcel of the God are also gold.
Hare Krishna. I'll not go in much in detail of this particular verse, but this is the most debated verse of Bhagavad Gita. So I'll just make 1 or 2 points about this word Mamai Vamsha. So Mamai Amsha. So they are my part and parcel. So the material conception teaches us, for example, let's say when a husband and wife or the mother and father comes together, unite, and they produce a progeny or they procreate a progeny, then the progeny has come from the body of the mother and has been nourished by the mother's body, etc. And some part of her has gone into the body of the son or the daughter which is born. However, in the case of the Lord remains as it is. It's not that there would be anything less. It's not that the Lord grows just like the belly of the mother grows, and after the birth, the belly of the mother becomes thin, etc. Nothing. There's no change with the Lord. So why? Because the soul cannot be cut into pieces. Therefore, Prabhupada quotes us, we are living entities, we are Jivatma, we are soul, and as being soul, the nature of the soul is eternal. So what it means, we are one with the Lord, we are being his part and parcel, which means qualitatively, we also have the same qualities as with the Lord. But in quantity, we are very, very insignificant. Qualities means just like the way, all the qualities, what do I say about it? Qualities, just like Prabhupada gives an example, the ocean and the drop of ocean water, they both are salty. That's a quality. In that way, we also have the same quality of the Lord. That's the meaning over here. Now, Mayavadis, or those who are the understanding that Brahman is the source of everything, the question arises, Brahma and Brahman, which means the spirit soul, is indivisible. If it is indivisible, then how so many souls are manifested in this creation? If we all are one, if we all are Narayan, then how we have become fragmented? So that the concept of fragmentation is described here. No, it is not fragmented. We are eternal and we have originated from the Lord. The soul is never divided. That's the point here. Those who have studied Shupanishadni, they will get some clue over here. We'll discuss more details in our Bhakti Shastra. Let's continue. Text number 8. So Arjuna said, oh, okay, so you are the Supreme Personality God, you're the Father, etc. But the life is meant to be enjoyed. Why do we worry so much about it? Who has worried, who has bothered so much about what's going to happen after death? So Krishna said, hey, wait a second, what are you talking about it? You're saying the life is meant to be enjoyed in the material world, and why to discuss as subject matter about eternal life and the life after death, etc. Let me tell you something. Now Krishna says, Shariram yadavapnoti yachapi utkramadishwaran dritvaitani samyati vayu gandhani vashayat. The living entity in the material carries the different conceptions of life from one body to another, as the air carries aromas. Thus he takes one kind of body and again goes to take another. We have discussed this in the past. When a death happens, the gross body is given up, but the subtle body continues. So the living entity in the material carries the different conceptions, which means what he has stored in his mind and intelligence, particularly the mind. Intelligence doesn't store. Mind is a storehouse. So he accompanies the mind. So from the beginning of our existence in this creation, material world, we get covered over by mind. That's what mentioned in one of the previous verses. Manashashtani Indriyani, Prakati Sani Karshati, and that mind accompanies us life after life. That's what mind. An example is given, just like the air carries aromas. Purports. All right, Mother Medhavni, go ahead.
Hare Krishna Prabhu Dandat Purport by Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Here the living entity is described as Ishvara, the controller of his own body. If he likes, he can change his body to a higher grade, and if he likes, he can move to a lower class. Minute independence is there. The change his body undergoes depends upon him. At the time of death, the consciousness he has created will carry him on to the next type of body. If he has made his consciousness like that of a cat or a dog, he is sure to change to a cat's or a dog's body. And if he has fixed his consciousness on godly qualities, he will change into the form of a demigod. And if he is in Krishna consciousness, he will be transferred to Krishna Loka in the spiritual world and will associate with Krishna. It is a false claim that after the annihilation of this body, everything is finished. The individual soul is transmigrating from one body to another, and his present body and present activities are the background of his next body. One gets a different body according to karma and is to quit this body in due course. It is stated here that the subtle body, which carries the conception of the next body, develops another body in the next life. This process of transmigrating from one body to another and struggling while in the body is called karshati, or struggle for existence. Thank you.
Okay, a question for all of you. Counter argue. If somebody tells you after the annihilation of this body, everything is finished, please raise your hand if you would like to give an answer. This life is all in all. After you die, everything ends. There's nothing else after this. If somebody tells you, how would you counter argue? Give me 1 point. There are different ways of arguing, giving a counter argument. Give me 1 point for it. So this is the only life. When we die, everything ends. This is what the science believes. This is what the modern religions believe, because all are man-made. And the reason why this belief has been established, so that we can exploit others in this lifetime, and we don't need to discuss about the rules and regulations, the laws of the orders of the universe, and we can create our own laws, and we can define our own way of living, and just do the hell we want to do it. Like that. All right. So, Mother Anuradhika, go ahead. How would you defeat this argument?
Yes, Prabhuji. Actually, we see a number of instances where even small children also, they have terminal diseases like cancer. That is one, because of the previous karma, because of the previous birth that has come in. And we also see small babies who are like genius. Even 3-4 months babies reciting so many slokas. And in fact, Radhesham Prabhu was showing a video the other day where a dog is telling even numbers. If you ask 4 minus 3, it will tell 1, it will bark once, like that. So there is something which is coming from the previous births.
Okay, so uninherited skills. That's your point. Fine. Okay, thank you. What else, Mother Yogi? You have something to add? Go ahead.
Pranam, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, we can also quote the experiences of the people who have experienced truth, the absolute truth, like Lord Brahma, and quoting the verses from Brahma Samhita itself. Then
Shastric Praman is there. Shastric Praman. And I believe you're kind of saying about past life experiences also, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Well, people would say, who knows? They might be lying. Still, it's not a very solid proof. Scriptures, they're anyways mythology. Now, what else? What else can you say? How can you really prove? Given evidence which itself is self-defeating, which they cannot deny because it has been established by them only. What is that? And we discussed elaborately on it. Let me give you an example of the chapter where we discuss that, 7th chapter. Let me give you an example of the verses where we discuss that, 7.4 and 7.5. It's only one line. It's one single concept. They cannot argue against it because it has been established by them. So many theorems, so many research work is made on that, which is Vedic principle also. And and the answer is the energy can never be destroyed. That's it. That's it. We don't have to go into reincarnation. We don't have to go into scriptures for that reason. Even the modern science recognizes that we are but energy. You know, all this equipment, gadgets, what they have, they're measuring certain parameters of energy only, na? So they also recognize we are energy. If we are energy, how can the energy cease to exist after what we call as death? It is not possible. It violates the basic established principles and concepts of modern science. Energy can be converted from one form to another, but can never be destroyed. Hare Krishna. So with that, we pause here for today. Please pay attention to important things. Don't just hang on to some hearsay. This is something which, because you're dealing with largely with the educated audience. So now ask them to argue. What would they argue? Would they say it is not the principle? Then they're a fool. Then what are you studying? Your whole science is based on this principle only. Anyway, so we'll continue reading from tomorrow from text number 9. With that, we pause here. Hare Krishna. Jagadguru Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Just a quick thing. I might not be able to take today's Bhagavatam class because I just realized I don't have my book on me. So I don't have a book and I don't have a time to even go through the Veda-based verses because there's Aarti now. So we'll have it next week when I'm back at Hinjawadi. Hare Krishna.
Prabhu, tomorrow will you be having class? Because I see you all are going for a trip.
Bhakti Shastri class?
No, reading of the Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah, we'll have.
No, Prabhuji, we are not having tomorrow class because we are going in NBCC temple.
No, so I am already in NVCC temple. You are coming to NVCC temple. I can do the morning class nonetheless, na?
Okay.
Okay.
And while you are sitting in a bus, you can put on a headphone and can still hear it.
Okay. Thank you, Prabhuji. We were not
I would
aware.
not be able to have an afternoon class. So
Yeah.
we do the morning.